little one. Join us.
In the midst of a pitch-black abyss, a single tiny light flickers like a lonely soul lost in a void. The nights of the Edo period were fundamentally different from the dim evenings we know today, protected as we are by the artificial safety of streetlights and the ubiquitous blue-white glow of smartphones. They possessed a depth and a suffocating weight that is almost impossible for a modern mind to fully grasp. When the sun dipped below the western horizon, and the faint, lingering glow of twilight vanished into the earth, the world was swallowed by a true darkness. This was not merely the absence of light, but a physical presence of darkness that felt heavy, pressing against the skin with an invisible damp force. Within the fragile walls of a wooden house, you could hear the wind whistling through microscopic gaps, the distant, mournful howl of a stray beast, and even the frantic rhythm of your own heartbeat echoing in the sudden, oppressive silence. In this vast, empty space, people huddled around the meager light of an Andan lantern, treating that fragile, dancing flame with a mixture of reverence and primal dread. It was in such a silence, where even the sense of sight ceased to function properly, that a sound would suddenly slice through the stillness. It was a wet, unsettling noise that seemed to vibrate in the very marrow of one's bones. Pecha, pecha. It was the sound of something persistently, almost rhythmically, lapping up a thick, viscous liquid with a disturbing intensity. To the human ear, it was a sound that triggered an immediate physiological revulsion, a signal that something fundamentally wrong was occurring in the sanctuary of the home. If you were lying in your bedding, held captive by the weight of the futon, and the paralysis of fear, hearing that sound coming from the corner of the room, where the lantern stood, how would you react? The air in the room would grow cold, the smell of burnt wick and old oil suddenly becoming sharp and nauseating. If you gathered the courage to lift your heavy eyelids and turn your gaze toward the source of that sound, you would find a sight that defies all logic and comfort. There, bathed in the wavering orange glow of the lantern, sits a small infant. At first glance, it might look like any other baby, perhaps not yet old enough to crawl or speak. But as your eyes adjust, the horror of the scene reveals itself with agonizing clarity. The infant is not resting or crying for its mother instead. It has reached its tiny, plump hands toward the Andan lantern, skillfully peeling back the translucent paper cover to reveal the pool of oil within. With a focused, almost trance-like obsession, the child is lapping up the thick, yellowish oil, its tongue moving with a frantic, animalistic speed. The child's face, illuminated from below by the flickering flame, is stained a deep, unnatural red, and its eyes hold a look of ecstatic, horrifying bliss. This is the Abura-akago, the oil baby, a creature that has haunted the collective memory of Japan, particularly the regions around ancient Omi, for centuries. To encounter such a being was to witness a perversion of the most sacred symbol of the future, a child. When the people of that era stood before this strange apparition, their hearts were not filled with the warmth of parental instinct, but with a chilling realization of the grotesque. Why does this infant reject the nourishment of a mother's milk, or the warmth of a simple rice gruel in favor of the greasy, foul-smelling oil used for illumination? The answer lies far beyond the boundaries of a simple ghost story intended to frighten children. It is rooted in the harsh, uncompromising realities of life in the Edo period, the desperate struggle for survival, and the inescapable weight of human transgression. From a folkloric and mythological perspective, the Abura-akago represents the intrusion of the hidden, whirled the yikai into the domestic sphere. The home, which should be a fortress against the terrors of the night, becomes a stage for the impossible. This evening, we will delve deep into the true identity of the oil baby, peeling back the layers of legend to uncover the historical and social truths hidden beneath its unsettling form. Have you ever felt a subtle movement in the corner of a darkened room, or a slight vibration in the air when you thought you were alone? Perhaps it was not merely a draft or a settling floorboard. In the shadows where our logic fails, the remnants of these old stories still breathe. waiting for a moment of vulnerability to remind us of the darkness we have forgotten. Consider the lantern itself, a fragile vessel of light, in an era of absolute shadow. For the farmers, craftsmen, and mothers of the Edo period, the oil that fueled these lamps was not a mere commodity. It was a resource more precious than life itself. In our modern world, we flick a switch and drown our rooms in a flood of electricity, rarely considering the cost of the energy we consume. But in the 17th and 18th centuries, light was a luxury that demanded a heavy toll. Most people relied on oil extracted from rapeseed or cotton seeds, and the price of these fuels was high enough to dictate the quality of a family's life. To keep a flame burning through the night was to literally burn away one's meager earnings. Imagine the psychological devastation of a family living on the edge of poverty, discovering that their supply of oil is mysteriously vanishing, night after night. In a society where the margin between survival and starvation was razor thin, such a loss was not a minor inconvenience. It was a threat to the very foundation of the household. If the culprit had been a common thief, the anger would be clean, a matter for the local authorities and a swift punishment. But when the thief is a spectral entity that vanishes into the air, the anger turns into a cold, paralyzing despair. The thought that an invisible force is slowly draining the lifeblood of the home, drop by drop, was enough to drive a person to the brink of madness. Have you ever noticed something in your own home, a bottle of wine, a specific spice, or perhaps even the digital data on your plan diminishing faster than it should? That inexplicable sense of being quietly drained is the modern shadow of the fear the oil baby once inspired. Among the various legends of the Abura-akago, the most historically grounded and detailed account comes from the province of Omi, specifically the area of Otsu in what is now Shiga Prefecture. In the bustling crossroads of Otsu, there once stood a sacred statue of the Jizo Bosatsu, a deity revered as the protector of travelers and the souls of children. Devout villagers would save what little they had to offer, oil to the lanterns surrounding the deity, their hearts filled with prayers for health, safety, and the prosperity of their descendants. However, this sacred space became the setting for a tragedy, born of human avarice. A local man, driven by a hollow void in his soul that no amount of wealth could fill, began to steal the oil from the Jizo's lanterns under the cover of night. This man did not fear the eyes of the gods, or the quiet resentment of the people he was robbing. Each night he would quietly transfer the consecrated oil into his own jars, later, selling it in the market to line his pockets. He found a dark joy in the growth of his hidden fortune, failing to realize that with every stolen drop, his own soul was becoming increasingly saturated with darkness. But the laws of the universe, or perhaps the weight of collective grief, are not so easily avoided. When the man eventually passed away, his spirit found no rest. Because he had stolen the prayers of the faithful, he was denied entry into the cycle of reincarnation. His essence transformed into a pale, flickering ball of fire, a Hitodama sentenced to wander the earth for eternity. It is said that this wandering flame, fueled by the lingering echoes of the man's earthly greed, eventually took the form of an infant to return to the world of the living. The Abura-akago is thus a manifestation of a soul that can never be satiated. It seeks the very substance it once stole, not out of a biological need, but as a repetitive, ghostly enactment of its greatest sin. This story served a dual purpose in Japanese society. It was a terrifying entertainment, yes, but it was also a powerful tool of moral enforcement. It taught that those who steal from the community, and especially those who desecrate the sacred for personal gain, will face a fate far worse than mere non-existence. They will become a parasite upon the living, a grotesque reminder of their own moral failure. The most disturbing aspect of this yokai, and the element that most effectively shatters the viewer's sense of reality, is its ability to shift between the state of a wandering flame and a physical child. There is something fundamentally wrong about a creature that ignores the laws of physics so casually. Picture the scene. A blue-white flame drifts through the gaps in the rain, shudders floating silently over the tatami mats. It emits no warmth. Instead, it seems to absorb the heat from the room, leaving a trail of frost in the air. Then, in the blink of an eye, the flame collapses inward and expands into the plump, soft form of a baby. The sudden transition from a celestial anomaly to a recognizable human shape is a profound psychological shock. The Abura-akago then begins its work, its tiny hands gripping the edge of the lantern with a strength that belies its size. It laps at the oil with an intensity that borders on the predatory. This contrast, the innocence of an infant's form paired with the malice of a spectral thief, is what made the oil baby one of the most enduring figures in Japanese folklore. Even the great ukiyo-e artist Toriyama Sekien, in his masterpiece Gazu Hyaki Yagyo, captured this creature with a chilling realism. In his illustration, the baby is hunched over, its back, rounded like a small animal, focused entirely on the consumption of the oil, while the shadows around it seem to writhe with a life of their own. Why choose the form of an infant? If we look deeper into the collective subconscious of the period, we find a hidden, unspoken fear that every parent harbored. A child is a promise of the future, but in a world of scarcity, a child is also a profound economic burden. There was always a dark, suppressed anxiety that a child might grow to become a mouth, to feed, that the family could not sustain, a presence that would drain the household's resources without ever giving back. The Abura-akago is the literalization of this anxiety. It is the parasite child, the being that looks like your own flesh and blood, but exists only to consume the very light you need to survive. Furthermore, the existence of the Abura-akago reflects the macroeconomic pressures of the time. During the Middle and Late Edo period, the price of oil was a matter of national concern. Poor harvests of rapeseed, the monopolization of markets by powerful merchant guilds in Osaka, and the instability of transport routes often led to sudden vertical spikes in the cost of fuel. For the common people, to have light was to burn money. The stress of this economic instability, the constant pressure to save, and the fear of an uncertain future needed an outlet. The oil baby became the face of that pressure. It was a personification of the inflation and resource scarcity that haunted every waking hour of the poor. In our modern context, we might compare this to the anxiety we feel when energy prices soar or when inflation erodes our savings. Imagine if there were a spectral entity that sat in your living room at night, invisible but active, draining your bank account, consuming your internet bandwidth and sapping the charge from your devices. We have replaced the physical oil with digital and financial flows, but the underlying fear of being quietly, relentlessly depleted remains the same. The Abura-akago is not a dusty relic of the past. It is a timeless metaphor for the fear of resource exhaustion and the vulnerability of our domestic sanctuaries. There was also a darker, more social dimension to the legend of the Abura-akago. In the tightly knit, self-policing communities of old Japan, such legends were often used as a means of social exclusion. If a child in a particular family showed an unusual preference for oily foods, or if a household's lamps seemed to go out more frequently than others, the neighbors would whisper, "That family has an oil baby," they would say. Such a rumor was a social death sentence. It implied that the family was cursed, perhaps as a result of a secret sin committed by an ancestor. Once labeled, a family would find themselves isolated. Their business would suffer. Their children would be unable to find marriage partners, and they would be slowly pushed to the fringes of the community. Behind the supernatural mask of the yokai lay the very real, very human malice of social stigmatization. The fear of being different or of harboring something wrong within the family was often more terrifying than the ghost itself. It reveals a chilling aspect of human nature, our tendency to create monsters to justify our own cruelty, and our desire to exclude those who do not fit our narrow definitions of normalcy. Imagine for a moment that you are a parent in such a time. You wake in the middle of the night to find your own child standing by the kitchen, their face smeared with oil, their eyes shining with a strange, dark intensity in the moonlight. Would you be able to see them as your beloved offspring, perhaps suffering from a strange illness or a deficiency? Or would the weight of the legends crush your heart, making you see a monster where your child once was? Would you protect them from the world, or would you cast them out to save your own standing in the village? This moral dilemma is the sharpest edge of the Abura-akago's story. It forces us to confront the fragility of our empathy when it is pitted against our primal fear of the unknown. As we dissect the structure of this myth, we find fascinating connections between the oil baby and other entities in the Japanese supernatural pantheon. There is a whole class of yokai obsessed with oil and fire, the Abura-sumashi, the Ubagabi, the Chochinobake. What binds them together is the theme of lingering attachment. These creatures were once human beings who held on to a powerful desire or a deep-seated grudge at the moment of their passing. The obsession with oil, a source of light, warmth, and energy, is a metaphor for the hunger for life itself. I wanted to be loved more. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to reach the prosperity I was denied. These unfulfilled hungers do not vanish when the body ceases its functions. Instead, they manifest as a repetitive, symbolic act of consumption. The fact that the Abura-akago takes the form of an infant is particularly significant from a psychological perspective. A baby is a being that cannot survive on its own. It requires a constant influx of energy and care from others. The oil baby's actions can be seen as a silent, tragic scream for the attention and nourishment it never received in life. When we hear that wet, rhythmic lapping in the dark, we are not just hearing a monster. We are hearing the echo of a soul that is starving for a connection it can never truly grasp. In our contemporary world, the andon lanterns have been replaced by LEDs, and the physical theft of oil has been relegated to history. Yet, the spirit of the Abura-akago, that restless hunger and the state of perpetual dependence, lives on in the modern psyche. Look at the people gathered under the neon lights of 24-hour convenience stores late at night. Or those of us who stare into the blue light of our screens until the early hours of the dawn, consuming an endless stream of digital information. Are we not, in a sense, modern versions of the oil baby? We feel a compulsion to consume digital oil, likes, comments, news, entertainment to convince ourselves that we still exist, that we are not yet swallowed by the darkness of isolation. Just as the people of the Edo period feared the physical shadows, we fear the silence of being ignored and the darkness of being disconnected. We drain our own mental and emotional energy to keep our digital lamps burning, often at the cost of our own well-being. The legend of the Abura-akago asks us, what are you consuming to stay whole? Is the light you are chasing actually warming your soul, or is it merely a hollow substitute for the true connection you crave? The more we explore this figure, the more we realize that the Abura-akago is not a simple monster designed to scare children into behaving. It is a sophisticated cultural artifact, a crystalline structure composed of history, macroeconomics, and the universal patterns of the human mind. On its small, fragile-looking back, it carries the sorrow of the nameless people who struggled through the upheavals of the Edo period, and the timeless, primal dread of being alone in the dark. It reminds us that our fears are never truly gone, they only change their shape to fit the era we live in. If you are alone in your room tonight and you hear a faint, wet sound pecha coming from behind the wall or from the depths of your closet, do not be too quick to dismiss it. It might be the memory of a lost age, slipping through a crack in the fabric of time to seek the energy it needs to sustain its haunting. In that moment, do not turn around. Do not look into the shadows. Behind you, there may sit an infant with a face as red as a dying ember, smiling a toothless, oily smile as it waits for the light in your heart to flicker just enough for it to take a taste. It does not want to hurt you in the way a common beast might. It simply wants to consume the very essence of the light you have built your life around. The darkness of Edo was a graveyard for many stories we have forgotten. And the Abura-akago is just one inhabitant of that vast, silent archive. To trace the footsteps of these monsters is to look into a mirror that reveals the parts of our own humanity we would rather not see. Yokai have always been with us, standing just out of sight, illuminating the shadows of our own hearts with their strange, unsettling presence. As we sit here in the safety of our modern world, the story of the oil baby serves as a bridge, connecting us to the struggles and the profound imagination of those who came before us. Now, as the long, strange tale of the infant who licks the lanterns draws to a close, perhaps we can take away a small lesson. In an age of excess, the Abura-akago reminds us of the value of what we have, and the importance of compassion for those who are starving, whether for oil, for food, or for love. When the simple act of sharing becomes difficult, when we focus only on our own consumption, the shadow of the oil baby grows longer, reaching toward us from the corners of our rooms. Check the resources around you, your time, your attention, your emotional energy. Are they being drained by something you cannot see? Are you unknowingly feeding a monster that sits quietly in your shadow? Take a moment to acknowledge the light you carry and the responsibility that comes with it. If this story, flickering like a dying flame in the deep night, has resonated with the hidden chambers of your heart, I invite you to make this place a landmark for your future travels into the unknown. Please consider subscribing to this channel and leaving a like. Think of it as offering a fresh drop of oil to our communal lantern. Your support is the very energy that allows us to weave the next story, to keep the darkness at bay for just a little while longer. Each interaction is a way to ensure that the light of these ancient tales continues to burn, illuminating the path for all of us who seek to understand the mysteries of the human spirit. The night is still deep, and outside a cold wind is whispering against the glass. Let us not peer any further into the abyss for tonight. Sleep peacefully, but as you extinguish the lights, remember the weight of the silence that follows. If something seems to laugh softly in the dark after the switch is flipped, do not worry, it is likely just the settling of the house. Or perhaps it is the quiet satisfaction of a guest who has found exactly what they were looking for. Good night, and may your oil last until the dawn.